Hello, I'm Ben. Welcome to the channel. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about site improvement or transformation, right? So in the past I've had different titles, one of which was the Director of Transformation, where I traveled across the country to different sites and improved those sites. And then in director capacities and vice presidential capacities, I had the same role in fixing sites and fixing the expectations around the sites. So I'm going to go through basically 16 of the items that I wrote down here that I think are impactful for anyone. And if you do these things or if you emulate these things, you should be able to have an impact on the site if you are truly being objective and you have the end goal in mind. So I would say the first piece is to know where they're at. So look at performance for the last quarter, look at it for the previous year, and look at 2 years previous if that type of data is available. The reason I say that is every site, every store, every business has a situational performance based on seasonality, right? So what you don't want to do is go in and pick this season, which may be the slowest season, and then compare it to the first quarter of the year, which may be their busiest season. You want to make sure that you have the proper picture of where they're at within that seasonality of the year. So you want to observe and see what's going on. The next piece of that is you want to stop bad habits now. So basically, while you're observing, if you see something that's not appropriate, you need to address it right then. I've said many times to leaders, what you don't address, you just approved. So you have to, every time you see something that's done wrong, shut it down. Okay. And if that means you bring a whole process to a complete stop until you can get that corrected, then so be it. I went to a site one time where production was within the parameters, but the quality was not, which means people were slinging junk, right? I mean, they weren't doing what they should have done on their repairs or their construction or what they should have been doing. So what happened was they were meeting the metric, but the final product wasn't sellable because it didn't meet the quality expectations that the customer would expect. And then the flip side of that is if they're being paid per piece, you're paying for something you're not getting, right? You're paying for a performance based on a number, and the number should be within the quality of the expectation. So in all situations, the right thing to do is pay for performance, but you have to make sure that that is adequate and appropriate to what you are expecting to come off that line. So number one is observe and stop bad habits now, meaning if you talk about waste and what the 8 different types of waste are in lean, etc., muda is what we talked about before. Overwork and rework are 2 different types of waste, right? So if you have someone throwing garbage and then it's going to have to go back and be reworked. So now you've had that person you paid first, you've had the whatever hands have touched it since then that you're now paying. You've had to do a quality inspection on it as well, and then you're sending it back to the person. You're not making any profit on this situation. You're paying. So it's better to stop and make 1 unit at a time with an inspector on each individual unit than to pay all that difference back and forth and that travel. Movement is not necessarily productivity. You want the movement to be effective and you want the product to be sellable, right? So observe and stop bad habits now. That's number one. I talked about in the past how engineers design a plan too. And if you step back and watch, you'll see how people actually use it. Safety lanes are a good example of this. I've gone to a place before that had the best safety lanes set out, and it was clear that it's really, but it was a longer path. And so what I would do is around lunchtime, I'd stand out there and watch. And you'd see that people would not use the safety lanes. You'd see them cut across the open floor because that was quicker to the path to the lunchroom or the break room or the cafeteria. And that's kind of an example. So of course, when forklift drivers or lift movers or whatever that is, whenever the equipment is being parked, if you have people walking across the floor, running across the floor, you now have an increased situation for risk or harm. So observe and stop bad habits now. People are going to tell you they're doing it the right way. You have to observe and make sure that that is the case. And if they do, celebrate that, give them a pat on the back for it, and then look for best practices to improve it. But most of the time through observing, you will see the gaps. You'll see what you need to do and what you need to refigure so you can support what the people are doing and make sure that it is the most safe and successful and productive way. So number two is review the hiring protocol. So outside of the labor that's wasted, the typical issues that you find in most failing businesses are that the team is either one, not unified and working together. And the situation with large companies, it may be that up high at the CEO and the VP level, they talk about things and do things at a different level and they have game plans and it gets out, but those game plans never get to the front line. All right, so that's not a hiring issue. That's a continuity of process issue. That's a continuity of communication issue, and that's an effective communication issue. That is very common in big businesses. So when we're talking about proper hires and review of the hiring protocol, you always want to hire the right person for the job. Okay, it's stupid if you own a business and you're trying to make that business waste as little as possible and make as much as possible and sustain the customers through keeping them happy and have a product that meets their quality expectations. Then you need to hire the right people to do that, right? So if you're hiring based on nepotism or any of these other things that the equal employment opportunity, looks down upon. If you're doing any of that stuff, it really doesn't make sense that you're even in business, right? In business, you want to be the most competitive. The way you're the most competitive is you hire the right people. Hard to let enough. But I'll say this. You want to review the hiring protocol. You want to make sure it's doing appropriately. So what I always suggested is look at the resume, make sure they have at least 2 years work experience that's continuous at one employer, make sure that their quality of being an employee, that a quality employee is suggested and supported in the resume. One of the things about using temporary help is a lot of times those people that are temps for a reason, meaning they have attitudes, they have issues that don't allow them to be a long-term employee because either they don't show up for work, they quit, or they point out because they don't have their situation under control enough to be that stable employee to become to work in that stable work environment. And believe me, the stableness of your employees determines the stableness of your work environment. If you want a stable work environment, a stable business that takes care of your customers in a stable manner, then you need to be hiring the right people. You need to pay them enough to stay. You need to pay for performance and pay productivity so you keep the best people and they're motivated to stay there. And the more you do that, the more success you'll have. So number one is observe. Number two is look at the hiring protocol. Number three is take on all outliers and challenge what they're doing so you can wrap them up appropriately. So all units, if you're in one business and you're working at one business, and so you're not a consultant going to different businesses, you're working on one specific business. Theoretically, if you think about the franchise model, you should be able to take processes from one location and see those replicated across all locations, right? That's the expectation. That's why people buy franchises. They do that because everything is already there. The outliers to those processes and procedures are what you should attack because you know that's an opportunity because the best practice says this is how we do it. If you stick to a best practice, it suggests that it's safe, it's clean, and it's lean. That's why you use a best practice. So if you have best practices that have shown proper performance and proper procedure elsewhere, then it's going to be good here as well. That should be the expectation. Now, it's not saying that every location is the same, but it's saying what works at one should work at the other. And then as you work through the processes the same and you find ways to cut out other waste, then that's what you do, and you'll have a new and improved best practice. So take on all outliers is number three. Number four is lead by example. As a leader, if you want to have an impact at a site, people have to see that you're drinking the Kool-Aid, meaning you can't be on the floor complaining about the company with the same people that you would have change things to be more correct and be in line with the company. So lead by example, start to finish. By the time you start that job, you should have this. People should have the same opinion of you at the time you leave, which is you're there to help them, you're there to have an impact, you're there to make their lives safer and more productive and cut out rework and waste. So that should be what you're doing. So lead by example. Number five is set the record straight. Correctly evaluate the team and the processes. So set the record straight. What you'll find when you go to places is people have opinions based on different biases, internal biases, recency biases, whatever it may be, opinions of others that have shared that. Sometimes when I go to a site and people want to come to me and review the team with me, I say, no, thank you. Let me watch and learn myself and see what's going on. And then once I get into the process, we can compare notes later down the line. What I don't want to have happen is maybe somebody wasn't in favor, or maybe there's cliques within an organization, which is ridiculous. What's ridiculous to me is you hire the right person, hire the right people, and then you allow cliques to make them underperform and allow an aggressive work environment. That's stupid to me. So you want to set the record straight and make sure you're correctly evaluating your individual teammates, those valuable individuals. You want to make sure you're evaluating them appropriately. The reason you evaluate, it goes by the old 70-20-10 rule, which I got that from Jack Welch, and we'll review some of those books later on the channel. But the 70-20-10 says 70% of the people are are going to do, be the salt of the earth. They're going to come in and do what you expect them to do every single day and nothing more, right? So they're going to come in, they're going to do what they need to do to earn their paycheck. Then you're going to have 20% that are your superstars, are the people that outperform and go above and beyond every single day. These are the people you should be training up with the intent on promoting and pushing them into leadership roles if that's what motivates them. And then that last 10% is the 10% that you're actively trying to either coach up or coach out. Meaning they're your bottom 10% of performers. They're not doing what's necessary to get their paycheck. They're basically clocking in and clocking out every day. Those are the ones that are always doing the gossiping. They don't ever have time to complete their work, but they have time to talk for 20 and 30 minutes every time they walk away from their production area. They also are a safety risk because they are distracting people during the workday, taking those other people from their productive measures and also putting them in a way where they're not paying attention. So 20-70-10 rule, remember that. That comes from Jack Welch. We'll look at that later in some other videos as well. So set the record straight and correctly evaluate employees. All right, so that's number 5. Number 6 is correct headcount and cut spending. I've said on the channel before how you come up to multiplication through subtraction or addition through subtraction. It's exactly to the point that I just made. If you have too many people and there's not enough work to go around, what happens is you have people filling their day wasting time, which is a distraction to others. So it's a safety risk to others. That's why correct headcount matters. There's some books and there's some thought process out there that says when you have a location that goes above 150 people, you need to split the locations and start 2 locations. That 150 people at a single business unit is the maximum headcount that people can be in different roles and be appropriate to one another. Beyond that, you start getting that click process, you start getting that mentality that I spoke about earlier. So 150, and it's been in many, many studies, both psychologically and from business productivity, 150 seems to be that top line. If you're talking about several shifts and everything else, etc., it's all talking about one whole team. So if that means it's spread across 3 shifts, you're still talking about that 150 as being the max number. So have the correct head count and cut spending. Spending, especially if you don't have the right head count, if you're paying for temps, if you're paying for overtime, if you're paying for overtime on the weekends, extra shifts and all this jazz, you're spending a ton of money, which is less productive. It's costing you more per unit. It's costing you more per hour for the same amount of productivity or less because you don't have a tenured teammate who is a professional in the role. So get the correct head count, pay what it takes. If that means you have to pay a significant sign-on bonus and you have to pay a wage that's more aggressive than the wages around you, then so be it. Because what you want to do is cut your cost per unit. I guarantee you if you have the proper head count and you pay in the proper wage, which might be a higher wage, you're still going to pay less overall because you're not paying for unemployment, you're not paying for recruiting practices, you're not have to pay overtime and all these other things to cover for the lack of production. So have the correct head count and cut spending. Number 7, term all that are not acceptable from an emotional intelligence standpoint. So emotional intelligence, it's gained some ground in recent years. Companies are starting to see that there's actually some content to that. We went through some stupid years in 2020 with COVID and everything else, and people couldn't figure out, what they were going to do with their lives or what they were, and, everybody's hair was purple and blue. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. All that stuff is distraction from your organization. So here's me talking to you, the business owner, right? Or you, the business manager or leader. All that noise is just going to cause distraction and problems. Hire people that are appropriate from an emotional intelligence standpoint, meaning they come to work knowing that this is my job and I'm here to do a great job and earn my pay and get a fair wage for what I do. And have that American dream, have that thought process of I want what's mine, and because of that, I want my job to be as healthy and as strong as it can be, and I want to be as good as I can possibly be in my job, because that's what I take on from an intelligent, emotional standpoint as a mature adult. Those are the people you want to hire. If you don't hire those folks, or if you allow people who have an emotional intelligence deficit, that are inappropriate, that don't know how to talk to people, that are gossiping, that don't know how to be calm and reasonable, that don't understand that life is just a pattern of peaks and valleys. They can't control themselves in a situation. The more of those people you have, the less of a favorable work environment you're going to have. And so, like I've said before, if you want to run good people off, just keep bad people. If you want to run good leadership off, just keep bad people. So that's something you need to think about. You need to do those employee reviews. You need to see where they are from an emotional intelligence standpoint. You need to see how many altercations they have between themselves, their own family, their teammates, their leadership, their subordinates, how they handle everyone around them, and look at that to see how they actually add up. I'll tell you, manipulative people are disgusting and they're disgrace, and they will manipulate and drive, and you'll actually see that they're pushing other good employees and good teammates out, manipulating the situation and manipulating people's time. And then especially if they're in leadership, where they manipulate the ones that are subordinates in, they don't let their subordinates do what they know is right, and then later want to hold them accountable for decisions that they made themselves. It's stuff like that that you have to watch. You're responsible for your leadership line. If you see that you have a leader that's turning over a bunch of good leaders, then that's something to look at. Because let me tell you, if this team has never had a leadership before and they have a good leader, and your toxic, manipulative leader that lacks emotional intelligence runs this good leader off, guess what's going to happen next? All this team is going to leave too. Because once people see what good leadership is, they will not accept bad leadership. They will go somewhere where they have the opportunity to have a situation where they're appreciated, and that is shown through how they're treated daily and how they're rewarded through pay, appreciation, and grace at the workplace. I always say grace before grit, right? If you're all grit, then you're not working on a team. You're not looking at a long-term goal. If you're all about hammering on the 10% that went wrong instead of celebrating the 90% that went right, you're missing the point of having people work with you and being part of a team in general. Okay, so term all that are not on a right emotional intelligence standpoint, or not right from an emotional intelligence standpoint. 8 is retrain leadership and give small amounts of autonomy back a piece at a time. So you've gone into this place, it's broken, you found some bad things, you found maybe some dishonest things, you've done the proper write-ups, you've done the proper terminations and all these different things. So now what you want to do is show your leadership at that site that you trust them. You want to give them that trust back, right? So then you're starting to give back bits of autonomy, the things that you used to inspect daily. Now you're going to inspect it weekly. You're going to have them report to you daily and tell you what's going on. What you do is you slowly give that back and show, look, we had problems, but that was our problems. It wasn't your problems. It was our problems. Now we fixed those things. We figured those problems out. We fixed them. So now that we fixed them, I'm going to trust you to keep this in line, and we're just going to check in from time to time on that. And you give that autonomy back a piece at a time. If you do that, not only will your leaders be appreciative of that, they will now feel that they're actually part of fixing the process. And it's not us versus them. It's we together. We're not happy with the performance of the situation. So together, we found what was broken and we fixed it. So it's very important that you do that like clockwork. Once you go through and make those corrections, you start handing that autonomy back for your leadership to do those jobs that you pay them to do, because they have the background, you hired the right person, right? They have the professional performance to support them, know how to do that. You can take a very good leader and put them into a bad situation at a place, and they'll hear as they try to make changes, this is how we do it, this is how we do it, this is how we do it, and ultimately they'll be disengaged or they'll leave. And in the meantime, when they're earning that point where they get so disengaged before they leave, that may be when you're coming in to correct the situation. So you want to try to save them. I always say, see everybody as a 10 and let them prove otherwise, right? So once you start going and you start making those selections and those thought processes yourself by what you see and by the performance there daily and the energy and the effort daily, that's what you're going to do is you're going to then make those thoughts. And it says retrain leadership and give back small amounts of autonomy piece by piece. Retrain leadership. So then once you've done that, let them run. Let them have some opportunities to fail forward, but overall, let them prove that they can do that job, and they can meet the expectations that are now in front of them. Typically, people fail to meet expectations because they simply don't know what those expectations are. Okay, so that's number 8 rather. Number 9 is retrain the process, cut the fat, format the good to be successful. So let's go through that again. Review the process, cut the fat, retrain, and format the good to be successful. So the reason you want to review the processes constantly is that's how we come up with best practices. Best practices. So let's say you're a business that's got 100 sites. Let's say your business has got 1,000 sites or 3,000 sites. If you come up with best practices at one those most likely could be replicated and retrained across all sites. And now you're talking about saving the company tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So those review processes and retrain, that's extremely important that you do that to cut the fat. The fat is the waste, right? Whether it's this guy had to go this far to get processed over here, now it's got to come all the way back to get reprocessed, and now it's got to go back over here to be packaged. That most likely can be a linear process to where it's fed down here and it goes through all those things, and then it comes down here to be packaged, and now you're putting it in storage or putting it on a truck. There's many, many ways to fix processes to cut the fat. The fat, in that instance, think about forklift fuel. Think about the number of headcount you have to have on forklifts. If you have a line where you feed it here and you take off here that is a packaged product, that's 2 forklift drivers. Whereas if you have all these back and forths, now you got 5 and 6 forklift drivers. Now you have an increased situation where you can have a collision between forklifts, or a collision between a person and a forklift, et cetera, et cetera. Or you think about a food process. If you're taking food, instead of it going straight through a line to get fixed like a Subway or a Jersey Mike's, where they fix it in front of you and they start with the bread down here, and down here it's been cooked and you're at the cashier. If you keep taking away and everything else, every different set of hands, you restart a process, every different set of hands, you add a cost to that individual product, because your overhead it takes to support the process. So you want to do that. That's a huge, huge thing. When people talk about continuous improvement all the time, continuous improvement doesn't mean every single day you come up with some light bulb idea to change everything that you've done before and you're going to find something. I've seen leaders come into places like that and they try to reinvent the wheel, and ultimately you end up doing it the way you've done it because the process was appropriate, and this new suggestion around some way to cheat the process is nonsensical. I'm not talking about reinventing the wheel. I'm talking about removing the waste and cutting the fat. Okay. Next one is number 10, own it. Own it. Remove anything or anyone that's in the way. So if you're the business owner, you may have started to rely on a teammate more than you should, because it gives you a better quality of life in the fact that you don't have to be there as much. However, this person is running things not in the way that you want them run, so you're getting calls 24/7 anyway on fixing problems. The problems are costing you more money than what it would cost you if it had just been there in the first place. And ultimately, you're not doing yourself a favor by doing that. So own it. If you have a problem, you have to fix it. Remove anything or anyone in the way. You see how we continually come back to process and people. Process and people are 90% of what you do. If you talk about the 80-20 rule when it comes to process and people, you spend 80% of your time on the problems of process and people, right? 80%. And the problem is only 20% of what you're actually doing is what you're spending 80% of your time on, okay? So own it, fix it, be done with it. And then tomorrow is a better day, right? 11, cut all the noise. In most places that I've been asked to come in and fix, when you walk through the door, you hit this spider web of nonsense and noise. Somebody has an opinion about this and about that and all these things, and there's all this energy going daily into this process. So I'll give you an example. There was a restaurant one time that I was called, they asked me to come in and look at the issue and fix the problems. One, the first thing when I went to the restaurant and observed was they had too many teammates. You know, it was taking 3 teammates to run this restaurant up front. It was just a deli counter type situation in a small sitting area. 3 teammates could have easily done that and taken care of it and been effective and efficient, but it was taking 6 and 7. So they were all in each other's way. There was no room, right? And there was all this noise. They had all this downtime because you had twice as many people there as you actually needed. And so the orders were getting wrong. All this stuff was happening as if you were understaffed when actually you had twice what you needed. So what it came down to is they had these wraps that were made the night before, so they would really congeal and have the flavors that we're hoping for, and the rest was sandwiches and things of that nature. And what I watched, what I observed was, you know, you had people that would fix themselves in areas, and instead of working the floor and doing what they needed to do, my view of it was have someone customer service taking the orders, working the register, doing all that, have someone working the prep area for the food and all that, and have someone working the dining area and carrying the food out and taking it back and doing all that. Between those 3 people, they should be able to keep everything fast, effective, and efficient. And that's ultimately what the business did. And that business ultimately was sold for a profit after they moved to that headcount. But the thought process was it would have been easier. They had issues, so they thought it would be easier to just add more people when all that did was congest the area, and it created an environment where gossip was normal and created a bunch of noise. So number one, cut all the noise. If you observe and you cut all the noise, you can actually see what it is you need. You can grind it down to that where you're doing what you need to do, and then you're much more productive, much more proficient and efficient, and you have less mistakes, right? So the orders are getting out clear, and the people are getting what they wanted, and people leave with a smile instead of being confused and annoyed, because those staffers also that aren't doing anything are being loud and obnoxious and rude, right? So I mean, it's that kind of thing where they're not putting the customer as the primary focus. Now they're having their own interpersonal nonsense, and now the customer is left on the side thinking, do I wait until they're done yapping, or do I get to be a customer and buy what I came in to buy and leave? So just think about that. Cut all the noise. Number 12 is replicate and sustain the results. So as you go through all these things that we've talked about, 1 through 11, each process and each teammate and each position is going to be improved. So now step 12 is to replicate. So let's say we focused on this department and we got this department running like it should. Now you should replicate that same process across the next department. And as a big organization, as you replicate and go through and sustain those results, that's a key piece. Sustainability is where most processes fail. Many times people are hired, they come in, they show how to fix the place and say, this is what you do. And then after they leave, we stop inspecting what we should be inspecting every day. We stop having the same level of expectations from the team. We stop communicating in the way that we did when those things were going on. So that sustainability piece is the biggest piece of making the place better and getting the maximum payout for the effort you put in. So replicate and sustain the result. And now 13 is that what we've already said, inspect what you expect. So each time you move up the level in this process, you increase your inspection protocol, because you're giving that autonomy back to your team. You're giving those things back to the floor staff. So that's why you're going to inspect what you expect, because now everybody should be running like they should, and you're like a shark in water. Sharks have to swim, right, to stay alive. That's the picture that you want, is you keep circling and you keep walking through so you can observe everything and fix what needs to be fixed in that moment. And now you're operating at a higher level across the board. Number 14 is keep communication open and consistent. You don't lose focus on the communication. You make sure the effective piece is the understanding, which means the point you're trying to get across is what's being heard. You want them to repeat that to you so you know they got it, and you're going to ask them, what are you going to do that? They should be able to get you examples, and each week in your one-on-one, you should be able to review those examples with that teammate to make sure we're making that progress under their command and under their control. So keep communication open and consistent. Number 15 is hold consistent and constant processes. Sustaining is what we're talking about. You have to do that. You have to allow your leadership to do that. You have to allow your leads to do that. Now you have to let your floor staff do that. So you hold consistent and constant processes. And then 16 is be deliberate in all your efforts. Be deliberate. Let people know why you're there. Make it visible and known. Say, production is this. This is where it should be. This is what we're going to do to get there. Safety is this. This is where it should be. This is what we're going to do to get there. And if you do that and you have those conversations up front, then people know what they should be expecting. It should be clear. They come to work charged and ready to do their piece, and they should understand how their job is going to impact the overall goal and what their actual piece is. So that's my notes on site improvement and transformation. That's why it worked for me when other people were not successful and could not do what I did. That's why when I left places, people reached out later and said, I've never seen this done this way. I've never seen people do this quickly. What do you do? How is it so different? It's not a magic situation. It is a simple observe, manage, communicate, process, retain, and sustain process, and then repeat. If you do those things, you can improve sites, whether it's one or thousands, and you can see transformation, and you can have it work for you just like it works for me. I'm Ben. If you've enjoyed this, please share, please like, please subscribe, and follow up, and we'll put more on the channel about these things. Be good.